A shard of shrapnel grazed Lieutenant Mark Reynolds' eye during a firefight. At first, just a sting, but weeks later, darkness clawed at his vision. Pain became unbearable, and every plea for help was coldly dismissed. How far would the system go to ignore a wounded soldier? But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Lieutenant Mark Reynolds sat rigidly in the sterile examination room of the VA clinic, the pale fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, casting an unforgiving glare on the faded linoleum floor. The antiseptic scent clung to the air, mingling uneasily with the faint odor of old paper and clinical coldness. His left eye throbbed beneath his brow, a dull, persistent ache that sharpened with every blink. The edges of his vision blurred like fog rolling in over a battlefield at dawn, disorienting, suffocating. He replayed the firefight in his mind, each detail etched deeply. The sudden explosion, the deafening roar, the split second when a shard of metal kissed the skin around his eye before embedding itself elsewhere in his body. Back then, adrenaline had masked the pain. Now, the damage revealed itself slowly, insidiously. The shadows creeping across his sight weren't just symptoms. They were the silence of his injury, screaming for acknowledgement. Dr. Susan Clark entered briskly, clipboard in hand, her posture rigid, her eyes scanning the notes, as if Mark was a mundane case file, rather than a man fighting to reclaim his life. She was known for her efficiency, the kind of practitioner who prided herself on quick diagnoses and swift conclusions, a style born of overwhelming patient loads and stretched resources. But in her cool tone, Mark heard something else, a dismissal of everything he represented. His military service, the trauma buried beneath his calm facade, the urgent need for care. "You're probably just tired," she said, the words clipped, her gaze flickering briefly to the clock. "We don't see combat injuries here. Maybe it's dry eye. Try over-the-counter drops." Mark's throat tightened. Those words felt like a razor slicing through years of discipline, sacrifice, and hope. The sharp sting wasn't just physical, it was an emotional blow delivered by someone who should have been his ally. He wanted to argue, to insist that his vision was deteriorating, that the shadows were growing darker, but the fatigue that weighed on him pulled his voice back. Her dismissiveness wasn't born of malice, but of systemic indifference. Overburdened staff, underfunded clinics, a bureaucracy that squeezed out compassion under the weight of paperwork and protocol. Yet, for Mark, it felt like abandonment. He was not a tired civilian with a minor inconvenience. He was a soldier whose body had been marked by war, whose eyes bore witness to the violence he had endured. The very system designed to heal him was turning its back. Mark's motivation crystallized sharply in that moment, not only to recover his sight, but to reclaim his dignity and agency. The vision loss was not just a physical handicap, but a metaphorical erasure, a negation of his sacrifices. Each dismissal compounded the injury, deepening the wound inflicted not by shrapnel, but by neglect. Sitting there, he grappled with a growing tempest of emotions, confusion, frustration, and a simmering anger. How could those who swore to serve those who served fail so profoundly? The betrayal stung worse than the shrapnel ever had. Yet beneath it all, a stubborn ember of resolve flickered to life. Mark knew he couldn't accept this indifference. His fight was far from over. The battlefield had shifted, but the war for his well-being was just beginning. The darkness in Mark's left eye no longer lurked at the periphery. It was invading his world with relentless aggression. Shapes once familiar warped into indecipherable shadows. A sudden glare from a passing car seared through his pain threshold, leaving his vision fractured and raw. Every day was a gauntlet of worsening symptoms, and yet, at the VA clinic, Dr. Clark's responses remained a cold echo of dismissal. Each time he described the sharp flashes, the spreading blind spots, or the stabbing pain, she responded with the same tired refrain. Anxiety, exhaustion, dry eyes. When he requested a referral to a specialist, she shook her head, reciting clinic policy like a shield against his mounting desperation. The bureaucracy was an impenetrable wall, leaving Mark stranded at its base, his pleas muffled by procedure and indifference. Frustration coiled tightly inside him, each visit chipping away at his resolve. But fear pressed heavier still, fear that the shadows would soon consume his sight entirely, that the world would darken beyond reach. In the quiet moments between appointments, Mark's thoughts returned to the brotherhood he had left behind, the men and women who had faced the same fires and scars. They were not just comrades, but lifelines, vessels of knowledge forged in the crucible of shared hardship. It was through them he first heard murmurs of a different path, an Air Force medical center, staffed by flight surgeons with the rare expertise to recognize and treat injuries born of combat and aviation trauma. Hope flickered, fragile but stubborn. When he secured the appointment, walking into the Air Force Medical Center felt like stepping into a different world. The sterile chill of the VA was replaced by a purposeful hum. The staff moved with a focused energy that seemed to breathe life into the sterile hallways. He was escorted to a modest examination room where Captain Emily Shaw entered briskly, her uniform sharp and demeanor unyielding yet warm. Her eyes locked onto his with an immediacy that disarmed Mark's wariness. "You're not just a patient," she said, her voice steady but laced with empathy. "I know what you've been through, and I know what this means." Her gaze lingered on his left eye, narrowing thoughtfully. "This isn't simple exhaustion or anxiety. You've got a retinal tear. The shrapnel must have caused micro tears we missed. If left untreated, this can lead to detachment. Permanent blindness isn't just a risk, it's a certainty." Mark's breath caught, the weight of her words settling into his chest like a stone. She wasn't just diagnosing, she was revealing the gravity of his reality in brutal clarity. Yet beneath the clinical precision, there was a current of fierce determination. "I'm a former pilot," Emily added quietly, "so I understand what it means to be sidelined by an injury you didn't choose. You deserve care that respects that. I'm going to do everything in my power to save your sight." In that room, the gulf between neglect and genuine care stretched wide. But for the first time in weeks, Mark felt a surge of something he thought had been extinguished. Hope. Emily's motivation was palpable, rooted not just in medical duty, but in shared identity, a rare bridge between healer and warrior. She carried the weight of that responsibility with a fierce grace, and Mark, battered but unbroken, clung to that promise like a lifeline in the gathering storm. The sterile hum of the operating room was a stark contrast to the chaos Mark had endured on the battlefield, yet the battle now was no less fierce. Captain Emily Shaw stood beside him through every painstaking step of the retinal repair surgery, her steady hands and sharp focus a lifeline amid the darkness that threatened to consume his vision. The procedure stretched long hours, testing Mark's endurance not only physically but mentally, as the uncertainty gnawed at him with every passing moment. Yet beneath the anesthesia and medical instruments, something deeper unfolded, a reclamation of hope, fragile but fiercely alive. When the bandages were finally removed days later, Mark's world was not yet fully restored. But glimpses of clarity returned, shapes re-emerging from the shadows, faint outlines of light piercing through the veil of pain. The slow, arduous recovery was a testament to the precision and care of Captain Shaw and the flight surgeon team, but it was also a personal triumph, a silent victory over neglect and invisibility. As Mark healed, the ripples of his fight began to spread far beyond the confines of the clinic's walls. Veterans who had suffered similar dismissals found courage in his story, their voices rising in unified protest against the systemic failure represented by Dr. Clark's indifference. Rumors turned into demands, whispers into formal complaints. Staff within the VA, disillusioned but emboldened, rallied alongside the veterans, pressuring the administration to confront the uncomfortable truth. The clinic, once a bastion of bureaucratic apathy, faced mounting scrutiny from oversight boards and veterans' advocacy groups. Under the relentless weight of public outrage and internal dissent, the VA clinic's leadership capitulated. The decision was decisive. Control of the eye care unit would be transferred entirely to the Air Force flight surgeons, whose specialized expertise and empathetic approach had been proven indispensable. This institutional shift was not simply a change in staffing, it was a profound reformation of trust and responsibility. The system had been forced to acknowledge its failures, and more importantly, its veterans' right to competent, compassionate care. In the quiet of a follow-up appointment, Captain Shaw met Mark's gaze with a rare softness. "Your fight saved not just your sight," she said firmly. "It saved countless others from being ignored and dismissed." Her words carried the weight of hard-earned justice, but also a challenge to carry this victory forward, to transform it into lasting change. Mark left the clinic that day with more than the restoration of his vision. He carried a renewed sense of purpose, a fierce resolve burning beneath his calm exterior. The scars of neglect and dismissal had carved a path for advocacy, for standing up when others might fall silent. His story was no longer just about a single injured eye. It was about reclaiming dignity for all veterans, demanding a system that sees and serves those who have sacrificed. In the aftermath, the narrative of a broken system had been rewritten, not as an unchangeable verdict, but as a testament to resilience and justice reclaimed. Through courage and relentless pursuit, Mark had ignited a beacon of hope within the darkness, proving that even amidst institutional failure, determined individuals could force the hand of change and transform neglect into redemption.